Such is the impact of regulations on a startup that it can sometimes mean the end of a business, where even a slight change to an existing law can sometimes undermine an entire business model. It is a given that startups often disrupt old industries, and clearly, they are a benefit to the economy and can improve the lives of millions of consumers. But when innovation disrupts long-established industries, the help of a lobbyist can be crucial, as government regulators often seem more intent on protecting entrenched business interests than supporting new innovative businesses. Long-established companies, in comparison with startups, have long histories with government regulators. Startups, in contrast, make it almost a point of pride of being aloof from government, regulations, and politics. Nevertheless, government regulation is often the most significant barrier to future growth for an up-and-coming startup. As outdated regulations stifle innovation, government regulators move too slowly, or even worse, try to block startup business plans altogether. Regrettably, many startups inadvertently enter areas of business that are loaded with regulatory impediments, where the existing relevant laws are unclear, unfavorable, or both. For this reason, startups need to understand the applicable laws and regulations that may affect their business plans, including the background behind those laws and regulations. They also should have the insights into their business sector and main industry players they may be disrupting. This includes determining who might feel challenged by their innovation, but it should also involve identifying and engaging those champions in government and other potential supporters of their startup. The bottom line for startups is the government can make or break your business, unless you do something about it first. As most businesses are regulated in one way or another, the most important service a lobbyist can perform for a startup is ensuring that their startup is not in conflict with any applicable laws and regulations. This is just a fact of life for new startups. And one of the most essential functions of a lobbyist is to continually monitor the various 50 state legislatures and the federal government for any changes to laws and regulations that may impact the startup, and to make sure the startup is in compliance with any and all laws and regulations. In addition, a lobbyist can help a startup navigate the world of government regulatory agencies and bureaucracy, and even advocate for direct regulatory changes, or even craft new legislation to support and protect the startup business model, perhaps giving them an advantage over their established competitors. Lastly, the lobbyist can tell the story of your startup, explain to government regulators and elected officials a convincing and compelling narrative how your innovation improves the lives of consumers. Lobbyists are often misjudged as being an expensive extravagance with no real return on investment. But for startup founders and their investors, this proactive exercise in avoiding potential problems with the government will pay huge dividends down the line. Unfortunately, most startup founders tend to see the government as something that should just be ignored or disregarded entirely. But those startups who defy governmental laws and regulations with the hope that they can just sort it all out later, it never really works out in the real world. This is where the help of a lobbyist comes into play, who can determine any possible regulatory interference and head off any potential problems with the government. And just determining compliance with existing laws and regulations is just the beginning of a lobbyist's job. They should also enhance the startup's profile among regulators and elected officials and help communicate its value to the public by educating key decision makers in government. Two famous cases demonstrate the importance of using lobby power for a startup to avert any regulatory challenges to business plans and to lobby regulators vigorously to protect the startup business model. Recall the battle between Uber and the taxi industry, and the dispute between Airbnb and the hotel industry. Innovative services, such as Uber and Airbnb, have proven disruptive of entire entrenched industries and their traditional regulation structures. Uber as the poster boy for disruption in the taxi industry, is the perfect example of how a wide acceptance of smartphones has enabled clever entrepreneurs to take the complexity out of securing transportation on demand that once seemed unchangeable. Uber, since its launch, has grown from its San Francisco roots to more than 60 cities across 6 continents. In resisting Uber, the entrenched taxi industry, instead of matching Uber's innovation with better products and services, went the way of attempting to ban Uber's existence outright and called for government regulators to declare it in violation of laws against unlicensed ride services. Uber was undeterred by these regulatory obstacles and aggressively fought back against entrenched taxi regulations and worked hard to change the laws that worked against Uber's competitive advantage. In the case of Airbnb, which was also an early champion of the sharing economy that allowed people to rent their homes and apartments to others, has grown into a lodging giant, offering more than 6 million places to stay in more than 191 countries. Its listings outnumber those of the top 6 hotel chains combined. For a long time, the hotel industry did not consider Airbnb much of a threat. But as Airbnb became bigger and more successful, the hotel industry began to realize they had something to worry about. And eventually, Airbnb incurred the wrath of hotel industry regulators, who said it illegally circumvented hotel safety regulations and restrictions on short-term apartment rentals. Airbnb responded vigorously by utilizing a swarm of lobbyists across the country to build relationships with governments at all levels, challenging local hotel regulations. Despite these challenging hindrances to their startup models, Uber and Airbnb took their respective industries by storm, and today, the size and scale of Uber and Airbnb now rivals their main competitors in the transportation, hospitality, and other related industries. The lesson here is startups need to be proactively responsive to concerns of government regulators, and it was only due to an early and robust defense of their business models that both Uber and Airbnb were able to overcome difficult governmental and regulatory stumbling blocks. But other startups have not been so lucky. When government regulators have concerns with your business model, startups need to respond to those concerns, not only because it's the smart thing to do, but because it will build credibility and good relations with the government that will be extremely important at later stages of your company. It is a given that innovation always outpaces regulation. In recent years, government regulators have struggled to remain relevant in a digital economy that appears to neither want nor need their interference. Nevertheless, the disruption caused by new business models has led to pushback from government and their regulatory agencies, as well as from the entrenched business interests they serve. Established and entrenched business interests have long histories with government regulators, and startups need to incorporate into their roadmap a strategic plan for dealing with government officials who may control their fate of their startup. And startups, without question, need to embrace a less naive view of government, as they are not very often supportive of technological disruption and innovation. Startups may believe that they belong outside long-established regulation systems, but they do not. And a strategy to just ignore the government until the very day they come knocking is risky. This is where a smart lobbyist comes into play, who can look for any potential regulatory interference and head off any impending problems with the government. And it's also a sign of good judgment and business savvy when startup founders realize that navigating the government can be just as essential as maneuvering around their business competition.